will effectiveness of Nigeria's security and defense system remain a subject of concern? But who and what should be held responsible for the unending stories of crime and terror? Only in the first half of this year, that's 2025, the armed conflict location and event data reported approximately 5,000 fatalities due to crime and terrorism right here in Nigeria. So tonight, Babajide Ogunsanwo, who is the founder of Leadership by Data and Channels Television's chief data analyst, is here to share the latest facts and figures on national security and defense. Thank you very much, Babajide, for joining us on the News at 10. In the last 2 weeks, if we look at it, you have analyzed most of the security statistics across northern Nigeria, but tonight it is about the southern part of Nigeria. Are Nigerians living in the southern region feeling safer? What are the facts that we have on ground?
So the question of are Nigerians living in the southern part feeling safer, it depends on which region you really ask. If you ask those Nigerians living in the southwestern region, the data shows that the southwestern region is, yes, the safest region across all 6 geopolitical zones. So if you ask families in southwestern region, they perhaps will give you a positive answer. Excuse me. If you ask families in the southeast and the south-south region, now that's different. Now, let's take a look at the data, Anne, because within that data, there's good and bad news. Data on the first half of the year, security statistics from the number of fatalities perspective, especially looking at the data as released by the armed conflict location and event data. Now, here's the good news, Anne. From their report, they show that, yes, the security and defense agencies in the first half of this year have made some good progress relative to previous halves of the year. So this year, first half, southern Nigeria, 592 fatalities recorded, compared to over 600 fatalities recorded in the first half of 2024 and over 600 fatalities recorded in the first half of 2023. So good news for security and defense agencies based on the number of fatalities reported by the armed conflict location and event data that first half of 2025 showed progress. But Anne, here is the bad news. Within the southern region, the southeast, there are significant concerns. And if you take a look at that data, it shows us that approximately half of the fatalities recorded in southern Nigeria occurred in the southeastern region. So yes, we have families living in the southwest feeling a bit safe. However, families living in the southeast are really concerned, especially if you look at Anambra and Imo, 2 states within the southeast region that account for more than 60% of all fatalities in the southern region. And here's why I think Anambra and Imo come out very critical. Remember, it's now 4 dozen years past the decade. Around this period in 1967 was when the 12 states were created, and the East Central State was one of the 12 states that was created. And when further states were created, the 2 first states that came out of the eastern states were Anambra and Imo states. The first 2 states that were created out of the eastern central states, Anambra and Imo. And these are the 2 states now that are having the highest concentration of criminal and terrorist activities in the southeastern region. So some bad news for families living in Anambra and Imo states. However, some good news is Ebonyi State and the other states, Imo, Ebonyi, Enugu, Abia, actually have a larger expanse of land than Anambra and Imo State. So if you look at it from the fatalities perspective, crime and terrorism is concentrated in those 2 states. But if you look at the whole of the Igbo land, 30,000 square kilometers, most of those other states are making progress. And if you look at that data, for instance, in Ebonyi State, first half of this year, we have 45 fatalities recorded compared to 53 fatalities last year. In Enugu State, 35 fatalities recorded this year, 44 last year. In Abia State, 23 fatalities recorded this year, 26 last year. And don't forget, like I said, Ebonyi, Enugu, and Abia, the land area of these 3 states is larger than the land area of Anambra and Imo State. However, from the cultural perspective, Anambra and Imo States are really core to the Igbo land, and that is where the center of trouble still is.
But Babajide, based on these data, where are the two most critical states, or maybe the most critical states, and what is happening with security there? Based on what you have seen so far, how much attention is given to security in those regions?
So again, looking at the data we just shared, Anambra and Imo within the southeastern region are still the top two states. We're looking at over 170 fatalities reported this year. Last year, it was about 140, a little over 140 fatalities. So there's still largely a lot of concerns regarding military operations and how successful they are in Anambra and Imo State. We see a lot more calm in the other three states. But beyond even military operations, the concerns are that unlike the war against terrorism in the northern part of the region, where you have a lot of foreigners coming into Nigeria to fight, in the southeastern region, it's something clearly different. It is a lot of the locals. We have the Eastern Security Network, IPOP, so it's more of Nigerians fighting Nigerians. So the approach which the military and other security agencies are using in the southeastern part of Nigeria is significantly different, and there is a lot more non-kinetic operations going on in the southeastern region compared to what we are seeing across the north. So same country, two different military tactics and operations, but by and large, we still know overall that southern Nigeria, based on the data in the first half of this year, has been significantly calmer than the northern region.
But if there is one word to describe Nigeria's security situation and probably defense in the first half of this year, what will that word be?
One word will be a tough one. Maybe one phrase, one sentence.
Maybe a phrase.
So for me, it will be perspectives matter. And it depends on which side you really want to look at it. But if we stick to the fact, and if we strictly stick to the fact, there's some really good news and some news to worry about. So let's take a look at what has happened in the first half of the year, not just in southern region as we're about to end, north and south, because it then allows us to see the full picture. And if we take a look at the data from the armed conflict location and event data, what it shows, first of all, is the good news is that looking at the fatalities reported this year relative to what was reported last year, as of last year, first half of last year, reported 5,416 fatalities. That is down by 7% to 5,061. And I remember last year when this report was released, the Chief of Defense Staff, General Christopher Musa, had said he was going to make sure that the number of fatalities declined. So yes, based on the data we have, good news, total number of fatalities across the country has declined by 7% in the first half of this year relative to the first half of last year. Some good news. And here's the bad news. The bad news, however, is that the northwest and the northeast still remain the epicenter of terrorism. Now, the northwest. So what we have is, nationally, we see a decline in number of fatalities. However, the northwest and the northeast account for 70% of the fatalities of the country. So the concerns are, if we want to improve the global, the domestic, the international picture of security in Nigeria, and we want to really attract foreign investors, we want to attract and grow local industries and improve overall economic growth and development, the northwest and the northeast is where the president really has to put his focus on. And in the final analysis, speaking about the president has also recently taken a position on his outlook for security nationally. And if you take a look at the statement he made earlier this week regarding security, it allows us to see that, yes, perhaps we need to still stay optimistic, stay hopeful, and prepare for the second half. And in the president's words, in every corner of this land, every citizen shall know this truth. Your government will spare no cost, no effort, and no resolve to keep you safe. In simple terms, we should expect more allocation and more budgetary support for security agencies, and should clearly, from the president's position, no cost, no effort, and no resolve will be spared in keeping all Nigerians safe. So the second half of the year has started. We'll take a look at exactly the results we've achieved by the end of this quarter. So we're not going to wait until the end of the year for another review. By the end of September, end of third quarter, we'll take a look at the progress we've made again.
But if you were to just probably predict what the second half of the year will be. When you look at it from all the data and statistics you know and whatever is going on at the moment with Nigeria and what we have witnessed in the first half, what would the prediction be for the second half of the year?
Sticking to the facts, nationally, terrorism is on the decline. Those are the facts. Facts from the Global Terrorism Database, facts from the Armed Conflict Location and Event data, and the overall picture is that things are really getting better. However, there are some regions which we've identified, the Southeast, the Northwest, and the Northeast, that we hope that the president at the national level shows a bit more strategic direction so that this declining trend of terrorism does not reverse.
All right, thank you very much. Babajide Ogunsanwo, founder of Leadership by Data and Channels Television's chief data analyst. Thank you for your insights and contribution on the news at 10.
Pleasure is always mine, Anne.